I'll call this meeting to order and I'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Vice President Bowman, would you lead us in the pledge, please?
Repeat after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. So just a bit of housekeeping before we proceed. I'd ask that everyone mute their audio that is participating virtually so that we can reduce feedback during the meeting. And also, if you are in the boardroom and have a mobile device, I'd ask you to turn it off or mute it at this time. And now we'll proceed to a roll call of directors. Assistant Secretary Baca, please.
Director Gracia.
Here.
Director Bloomer.
Present.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna, his absence is noted. Vice President Bowman.
Here.
And President Ortega.
Here. Thank you. All votes will be conducted in roll call order. And with that, I'll move to item number 3, which is public comment on items not on the agenda. Assistant Secretary Baca, have we received any comments from the public?
I am checking right now for any last minute comments via email and none have been received so far.
Thank you. Is there anybody online or in the boardroom who would like to make a public comment on items not on our agenda today? Seeing none, we can proceed to item number 4, public comment on items listed on the agenda. Again, Assistant Secretary Baca, have we received any comments?
No comments have been received.
Thank you. And we'll pause for a moment. All right, we can proceed. And we'll note that Secretary Treasurer McKenna has joined the meeting, so we are now 5. We were in the middle of public comment with items listed on the agenda. Are there any members of the public online or in the boardroom who have public comment to be made at this time? Seeing none, we'll move to the next item, which is 5, our consent calendar items. I'll ask our board of directors if there are any members who might want to pull a certain item from the consent calendar. You can let us know. Yes.
Item D.
The water use, April water use reduction.
Yeah, it'd be good to get an update on
Okay. That'd be great.
if she has one.
Yep. We'll start with that. Then we'll have a report from Ms. Metzger about item 5D, please.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I just want to verify that you can hear me. I know the hybrid thing presenting is still fairly new.
We can hear you fine.
Fantastic. So for the month of April, water use was down 38% per meter compared to the baseline of 2013. Again, we're using that baseline as kind of a pre-drought era figure, and we are using the meter per meter number, which is something that for a long time, General Manager Krause has advocated because it really demonstrates the savings, taking into account all of the new water meters and development and growth that has occurred since 2013. So you can see here that, we're doing very well in terms of water savings. Well above the 10 to 13% self-imposed target that we set quite some time ago. And if you scroll down, you'll see that we are no longer in our level 2 of our water shortage contingency plan that was asking residents to save about 15%. Now that benchmark was a little bit different. That was compared to 2020 per the governor's request. And that was not per meter, that was gross water use. We have had a much cooler winter than we've experienced in past years, and we have seen some precipitation. So I think that those factors combined have led to a nice high savings season to kick off 2023. And with that, happy to answer any questions you have about the figures or any of our complaints on water use or water waste.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have some questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer, any questions? No. Secretary Treasurer McKenna, questions?
Nothing for me.
Thank you. And Vice President Bowman.
Nothing.
Thank you. And I have no questions as this time either.
Move item 5, recommended action.
Thank you. I have a first. May I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Director Gracia, a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Yes.
Director Bloomer,
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Yes.
Vice President Bowman,
Yes.
and President Ortega.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. Item number 6A, request adoption of resolution number 1300, placing in nomination Paul Ortega as a member of the Association of California Water Agencies Region 9 Board member. General Manager Kraus, please.
Good morning, Mr. President, members of the board. The Region 9 Nominating Committee is looking for the Aqua members who are interested in leading the direction of Aqua Region 9 for the 24-25 term. In a separate but concurrent process, Aqua's Election Committee has announced its call for candidates for Aqua President and Vice President. President Ortega has expressed an interest in continuing to serve as a member of the Aqua Region 9 Board and has been provided with the required paperwork for nomination. If President Ortega is chosen by Aqua to serve on the Region 9 Board, there is funding included in fiscal year 23-24 budget for board travel and conference expenses. Finance Director Sines has reviewed this report. Staff recommends that the Board of Directors adopt resolution number 1300, which expresses the agency's support of President Ortega's nomination for a director position on the Aqua Region 9 Board. After adoption, staff will send this resolution and President Ortega's nomination form to Aqua for their consideration.
Move the recommended action.
Second.
Okay, I have a first from Director Gracia, a second from Vice President Bowman. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Yes.
Vice President Bowman,
Yes.
and President Ortega.
Yes, thank you. Item 6B, request adoption of resolution number 1301, establishing policy and guidelines for investment of Desert Water Agency funds. Finance Director Sines, please.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Before you have a copy of Resolution 1273 that was adopted in April 19th of 2022. And the California Government Code recommends that the policy for investing agency funds be brought to the board annually for review. Now, after a review of the government code and the recent updates that are effective for 2023 and the California Debt and Investment Advisory Commission of local agency fund investment guidelines for the agency, it's been determined that we need to make a few revisions to our investment policy to incorporate those changes. So we have within the staff report a summary of the updates that have been made to the investment policy, as well as the attachments include a redlined version of that policy, plus the new policy of Resolution 1301. So we have updated the terminology of bond fund to financing corporation to be in line with the technical naming conventions that we use. Section 5 has been updated to add the maturity measurement guidelines and limitations on forward settlement dates in accordance with SB 1489. In Section 6, there has been the addition of or zero return to clarify that discount notes, technically, they do not have an interest rate, but they do provide a return. So there is a zero interest rate, but they do provide a return to the agency. So it is not just a zero return. And section 7, there's the addition of a reporting deadline on the investment policy to the board of directors, 45 to extension from 30 days to 45 days. In our previous policy, there was no indication of what that deadline was, even though California code did state that it was a 30-day timeline from the end of the quarter. The board has made the election in previous policies to receive monthly updates on our investment policy, which is provided to you every month. But this is just clarifying that there is now 45 days from the end of the quarter, but we will continue to do monthly reporting, but 45 days from the end of the month. And there is no updates to Schedule 1 of the investment policy, which has also been attached for your review. The Finance Committee has reviewed these proposed changes to the agency's policy and guidelines for investment of the agency funds. And legal counsel has also reviewed this policy. It is staff's recommendation that the Board of Directors adopt resolution number 1301, establishing policy and guidelines for the investment of agency funds. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
So it's my understanding these are just changes that won't affect the actual safety of the fund,
Correct.
right? So I would move the recommended action.
All right. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, thank you. Is there any additional comment from members of the board? No. So with that, we have a first from Director Grasha, a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Grasha,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Yes.
Vice President Bowman,
Yes.
and President Ortega.
Aye. Thank you. So item 6C, request adoption of resolution number 1302, revising the agency's reserve policy. Again, Finance Director signs.
And thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. In May 2006, the board adopted resolution number 926, which established a policy for agency reserves, which has been further revised a few times by resolution number 1187 and 1262, most recently in June of 2021. Currently, the target reserve for replacements is set to an amount approximately equal to accumulated depreciation of the agency's physical plant, not including state water project facilities. And to note, both the operating fund and general fund have this specific reserve. Annually, we review, along with the budgetary process, we review the agency's reserves and the reserve policy. And it was determined that the target reserve level for replacement is excessive and really not in line with how the agency manages its infrastructure replacement program. So staff desires to set a minimum target of approximately 6% of the agency's infrastructure, excluding the state water project, to align with a recommended replacement reserve target level that is utilized in the agency's most recent cost of service study. Additionally, we would like to set a maximum target level as well of a not to exceed of 10%. Currently, the policy does not have a maximum level for the reserve for replacements. For the current target for reserve for replacements of accumulated depreciation in our operating fund, the target balance would be $148 million in the operating fund, and in the general fund, approximately $11 million, with the current balance in the operating fund of 2.8, and in the general fund of that approximately that target amount of 10.3. When we, according to the proposed revision of the reserve for replacements, where the reserve should equal approximately 6% and not to exceed 10%. The minimum target for the operating fund would be 16.4 million, the general fund 2.8, and the maximum for the operating fund of 27.3, and the general fund of 4.7 million. Additional minor changes have also been made to section 1B of the reserve policy, where we're updating the name of the DWR tunnel project that will carry the fresh water from Sacramento River to the State Water Project diversion facilities in the South Delta from California Water Fix, which was its original name, to the Delta Conveyance Facility. We are also revising the description of the project from a 2-tunnel to a 1-tunnel project, and updating the 10-year cost projections with the most recent cost projections provided by DWR in order to determine what the estimated annual charges for the Delta Conveyance Facilities project would be. Legal has reviewed this reserve policy, and the Finance Committee has also reviewed these proposed revisions as well. And staff recommends that the Board of Directors adopt resolution number 1302, revising the agency's reserve policy. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Gracia, do you have some questions?
What is the reason behind this? What is the net effect of putting a cap?
It's the net effect of putting a cap. So the reason why we would like to put a cap on it is to really, say we're not going to overfund. So the target that is provided to us is the 6%. And we're just saying, hey, we're not going to go above that to just accumulate excessive reserves that are not necessary for this purpose. So giving us a minimum maximum, and those minimum maximums, they are utilized in the budget to really tell us the health of our reserves. Where do we stack up with our current projections as far as our minimum targets versus our maximum targets? So it provides us that so we can compare where we're doing according to our policy.
I listened to the meeting that Ashley had, and she mentioned during that rate study meeting that there was going to be discussion about the board reducing our property tax levy potentially. Is this associated, or would that be associated with this?
It does. One does impact the other, because how much money we bring in by the tax rate provides funding to fund the reserves. However, the reserve for replacements is not funded by the State Water Project tax in the general fund. That money is used for other reserves. So it relates to our reserve policy, but not specifically this reserve for replacements.
My inclination is that I wouldn't really want to make a change like that until we get settled in with the numbers on our involvement with the sites project. And I assume all these things are related in one way or another. And I just thought standing pat would be the right thing to do. But you're saying this doesn't really have an effect on that.
That is correct. Yeah. The funding for this specific reserve, which is so we have our reserve policies, but there's several different reserve funds or sub reserves that have specific purposes. This one is specifically for replacements of physical infrastructure of the agency. So replacement of the building pipelines. When it moves over to the general fund where that tax is collected and used, the State Water Project tax, that is only funds State Water Project related reserves, which this is not. So think Whitewater Hydro and the general funds portion of our operating facilities that they pay for.
All right, thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna has a question.
Yeah, excuse me. I might explain, I think. Sorry for being hoarse. It's allergy season for me. The the number we were carrying was based on a concept. You would take depreciation as an expense and you would move that money into a reserve replacement fund. And that the number that existed before was, I think, all the depreciation that ever occurred to all of the agency's assets. And so there's hundreds of millions of dollars, but the agency does spend money every year on replacing assets. So it's an ongoing process. We don't do the methodology that requires that reserve to be that large. Okay. So it's a correction, if you like, of philosophy of these two different ways you can do your accounting. We had a reserve based on accumulated depreciation, but we don't accumulate that depreciation. We spend every year fixing, or replacing assets. So that's why the change is so big. Okay.
Yes, and that's to speak to exactly what we're referring to in the staff report as far as, it doesn't fit with the methodology that we use for the replacement of our assets, our physical plant. So we incrementally, we fund it every year and we essentially take off bite-sized portions of it every year with different projects rather than accumulating this massive amount of funds and then drawing down from that fund to fund those replacements. So we incrementally replace every year our pipelines and other assets.
Thank you for that clarification and explanation. Director Bloomer, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Vice President Bowman?
None whatsoever.
Thank you. And I have none, so I'll look for a motion.
Adopt the resolution.
Thank you. I'll look for a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. So I have a first from Secretary Treasurer McKenna and a second from Director Bloomer. May we have a roll call vote, please?
Director Gracia,
Aye.
Director Bloomer,
Aye.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna,
Aye.
Vice President Bowman,
Yes.
and Director Ortega.
Aye.
President Ortega.
Thank you. So we can move to item 7A. We have discussion item 7A, fiscal year 2023-2024 operating general and wastewater budgets. Finance Director signs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before you have the fiscal year 22-23 operating general and wastewater fund budgets, and also the accompanying document of the budget highlights for your review. On May 25th, the Finance Committee met and reviewed the proposed budgets. And for 23-24 fiscal year, the budget will be presented for adoption at the June 20th board meeting. And so the budget highlight document has been prepared, and I would like to leave it to you how detailed you would like me to get within the board meeting. Would you like me to go through some high-level highlights that are within the budget highlights, or just respond to questions that you may have?
I would like to see just a high level overview, and then we can take some questions. Sure.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, first of all, to start off in our operating fund, within our potable water sales, we have a budget of 41.6 million of anticipated revenues that will be coming in. And that does reflect the variable rate of $2.28 per 100 cubic feet for fiscal year 23-24. Now, this rate does remain unchanged, the variable rate and also the fixed rate component for 23-24. Now, if the Proposition 218 proceedings that are currently underway are successful, staff will be coming to the board to recommend the first scheduled rate increase be implemented with an effective date of January 1, 2024. And this will provide approximately $1.5 million in additional potable water sales revenue. So at the very end, to give you kind of like where the bottom line is right now, we're anticipating having to take $3.9 million out of reserves. And this will reduce that amount by $1.5 million. Moving on to our backup facility charges, the revenue reflects a $289,000 decrease as compared to the 22-23 budget. And this decrease is attributed to the decrease in new developments that have been applying for new water service connections. So overall, within the total, in the operating revenues in the operating fund, we have a 0.5% or a $219,000 decrease as compared to 22-23. So we're pretty level with where we were anticipating to be last year. Moving on to the expenses within the operating fund under the source of supply, we have the major change that we have is that the groundwater replenishment expense reflects a $642,000 increase from 22-23. And this, it reflects the proposed replenishment assessment charge moving from 195 to up to 195 from 175 per acre foot. So that increase of $20 that again was anticipated to be in effect as of July 1, 2023. So overall source of supply does reflect a 3.7 or 248,000 increase as compared to the 22-23 budget. For the pumping expense, the maintenance of pumping equipment reflects a 495,000 or 112% increase, which is mainly attributed to well electrical control replacements and the inspection of the well 38 pump. Also notably, we have a $867,000 increase for power purchases. And this increase is based on historical power use and the anticipated rate increase by Southern California Edison. So that has been built in. So overall pumping expense has increased approximately 1.1 million as compared to the 22-23 budget. Skipping forward to the general and administrative expense. Overall, the general administrative expense has only reflects an increase of 0.8%, but there's a few highlights within because there's a little bit of give and take, but there's also some notable things that I would like to point out. When it comes to our pension, really it's a decrease of $42,000, which is pretty minimal compared to 22-23, but we do have an increase in the employer contribution rate. But we also have a decrease in the unfunded accrued liability. So those amounts kind of net to zero to that just $42,000 increase. Now, the status of the agency's pension fund is that we are currently underfunded, and that has created what is called a UAL, an unfunded accrued liability. So the agency has been working hard for several years to try and bring that number down. So to bring our pension fund to be fully funded. And beginning with the 18-19 budget, the agency began contributing an additional $1 million to the agency's UAL in order to pay down that unfunded accrued liability. We are currently in the 6th year of those additional $1 million payments. And over the last 5 years since the implementation of this accelerated payment plan, we have saved approximately $7.8 million in interest payments. And at the time that kind of accelerated plan was put into place, the estimate was that we were going to save a little bit over $10 million in approximately 10 years. Granted, interest rates change, which means the funding status changes depending on the returns that are received on those pension funds that are invested with CalPERS. So it is a little bit of a moving target, but given the recent changes to the market interest rates and the accelerated UAL payments, there is approximately 4 years remaining in this accelerated payment plan to become fully funded. So we are getting there. Moving down to our turf buyback program under water conservation. This has shown a decrease of $514,000 as compared to the 22-23 budget, but this is due to high demand in the past year. The board approved an original turf removal budget in 22-23 of $860 within the operating fund. Now, plus an additional $1.5 million in mid-year funding to bring the total in the operating fund for this turf buyback program at $2.36 million for fiscal year 22-23. So while we still are funding it, at 1.8 million from the operating fund. It's still a sizable program, but it's just a little bit less than what it was the year prior. Now, also to note, this is only 50% of the turf buyback program because the other 50% is funded by the general fund. So overall, with these changes, it brings us to an increase of just $128,000 or 0.8% as compared to 22-23 for our general and administrative expenses for the agency in the operating fund. Our recycled water plant expense, we do have a sizable increase within the treatment expense category. And this is mainly attributed to the required rehabilitation and coating for the recycled water plant splitter structure. For the recycled water plant expense, the total expenses reflect a $3.3 million increase as compared to the 22-23 budget. I'm sorry. Recycled water is just 898,000 increase. The total expenses for the operating fund is the 3.3 million. Apologies. Also provided to you in the highlights is for our capital additions, just a high level summary. The 22-23 capital budget is a 3.5 million decrease as compared to 22-23. We have a total capital budget of 14.2 million. And the agency continues to place emphasis on critical operational infrastructure such as pipelines and service replacements. And I've listed out a few of the major capital improvement projects. $4.7 million for pipelines, 3.6 for the recycled water effluent reservoir roof construction, 1.4 in vehicle replacements, and 1.2 for the AMI fixed network, which is phase 2 of that advanced metering infrastructure.
Can I interrupt, ask a
Yeah.
question?
Go ahead.
How many years is the AMI project before it's 100%, or I guess it will continue on as a budget item, I guess, because of maintenance, but is this a 4-year project or?
Yeah, excuse me. Currently, the first phase of it was to get all the earths in the ground, which we plan to have done by mid this year, basically by summer of this year. The second phase of that work will be constructing the network out in the neighborhoods that will allow us to bring the reeds into the facilities. We're anticipating that to take about a year, 1 to 2 years. The most difficult aspect of this right now is getting the material on board, and due to the delays that have been caused. But I anticipate having that in within hopefully 2 to 3 years, having that completely in place, and the reeds being brought into the facilities to include upgrades for customer portal apps and so forth.
So are the meters they're not in the ground yet, or are they?
All of our meters are in the ground. So the earths that go on the meters, we're completing that final phase to have every meter with an earth by the summer here.
Oh, okay.
And once that has to be done first.
Okay.
And then we're doing some programming updates, moving to a system called Temetra. Temetra is an upgrade of the current program that we have with Itron. Once we have that in place, we will work on building the radios and antennas out in the neighborhoods and so forth to get this here. And that's the final phase.
And this is that, like Steve was saying, this $1.2 million is to construct all of that. And so this would be to fully fund the second phase of the project. The first phase was funded in the 3 previous fiscal years with the installation of those ERTs. And now this is the fixed network component, and this is phase 2, which would be the final request. So this, unless something changes, this would be it.
And you think the system will be up and running in a couple of years?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
So moving on to the reserves, we do have a net reduction. I apologize earlier, I said 3.9 million, it's 3.39 million. So $3.4 million reduction to the reserves for replacements. And then if the Prop 218 proceedings currently underway are successful, we will be recommending that first rate increase effective on January 1st, which will provide that additional 1.5 million, bringing the projected impact to reserves down to 1.9 million. Moving on to the general fund. For the operating revenues within the general fund, we have the groundwater replenishment assessment charge. And that reflects an increase of $190,000 or 2.4% as compared to the 22-23 budget. And this increase is mainly attributed to the increase in the rack rate from 175 to 195 that is anticipated to be in effect on July 1, 2023. For power sales for Whitewater Hydro, it reflects $116,000 increase due to increased water deliveries in the upcoming year, due to the 100% allocation that we've received from the Department of Water Resources for the State Water Project. And of course, what we're going to be receiving in exchange from the Metropolitan Water District. Moving to non-operating revenues, the property tax revenue projections are based on a reduced secured assessment rate of 8 cents per $100 in assessed valuation for 23-24 as compared to 10 cents in 22-23. The agency's assessed valuation increased by 2.1 billion or 10.4% year over year. So, which has allowed us the ability to decrease that rate. Property tax revenues increased by 3.1 million or 8.3% as compared to 22-23. And when we are looking at what that property tax rate should be, we are looking at a long-term projection. So we're going out essentially to 2035 and looking what our needs are for the statement of charges for Department of Water Resources and the projects that are going on for that. So it is a long-term need. For the interest revenue for the invested reserves, that it reflects a $1.5 million increase as compared to 22-23. And this is attributed to the increase in interest rates as compared to 22-23 and the shift of investing more of the agency's reserves in bonds and other allowed investments according to our investment policy from LAIF to take advantage of those increased interest rates while still maintaining adequate liquidity within our funds for cash flow purposes. Overall, our total revenues reflect an increase of $4.2 million or 8.8% as compared to the 22-23 budget. Moving on to expenses, for under the source of supply, we have Mission Creek Basin Management, which are estimated to be at $588,000 for 23-24, which is DWA's share of the maintenance costs per our agreement with CVWD, which includes costs also associated with the grading. This is DWA's share of the maintenance costs. CVWD does share in those costs for the Mission Creek Basin Management, and it includes costs associated with the grading of the ponds for increased percolation rates. Under the other source of supply expense line item for 23-24, the total expense is anticipated to be approximately 1.2 million. In years where, and this is essentially the first year that we have seen this charge on here, and according to an agreement that Desert Water Agency has with the Metropolitan Water District. In years where the state water project allocation is greater than 50%, DWA pays a portion of Metropolitan Water District's average long-term cost to store water in Metropolitan's state water project groundwater storage program. And DWA's Table 8 allocation for the upcoming water year is 100%. And so this cost is according to that agreement that was executed in 2019 with Metropolitan. And again, this is a first year that we'll be incurring this expense, because since that agreement was put in place, this is the first year that it's been over 50% allocation. Overall, for the source supply in the general fund, there reflects a $1.3 million increase. Moving on to the state water project expense, all state water project budget costs are based on the actual 2023 Department of Water Resources invoices for July through December of 2023, and per our bulletin 13222 Appendix B that's received from that's published by the Department of Water Resources. And we use those figures for the January through June in 2024 for the second half of the fiscal year. Notably, the changes is that under our variable expense for variable OMP&R expenses has increased about $6.5 million as compared to 22-23. And this is due to the increased deliveries that we are anticipated because of our 100% allocation. Moving down to the administrative and general expense, under the water conservation line item, you'll see, again, this is the general fund side, is we see a decrease of $445,000. And that's a 17.1% decrease as compared to 22-23. And that is, again, for scaling back of that turf buyback program from the previous fiscal year, though it still remains a quite healthy, sizable budget.
Could we go back to that general legal expense, and then you made a reference to the turf buyback. So was there an overall decrease to the agency of 348, or was that for one?
So there's different areas in which we charge our record our legal expenses. So ones that are specific to source of supply are up in source of supply. And then this is our just general legal expenses for the general fund for the agency, notably like even participation in the board meeting would be there. The lawsuit with Metropolitan, not Metropolitan, I apologize, with Mission Springs Water District would be in this one.
So it's not just relating to one part of the fund. The 348,000 is overall decrease?
No, this is just a subcomponent of the general fund legal expense, general legal expenses. There are other places within the general fund where legal expenses are recorded. And then when you move over to the operating fund and even the wastewater fund, there are for legal expenses that apply just to the operating fund, it's charged the operating fund and wastewater as well.
All right, thank you.
So overall, the expenses of the general fund have increased $3.2 million as compared to the 22-23 budget. For our bond service payment, it reflects we have approximately $1.3 million that will be due within the upcoming fiscal year for our 2016 bond refinance series, which reflects over a $302,000 savings just for fiscal year 23-24 alone. The realized cumulative savings of that refinancing of those 2007 bond issuance original series is $3.6 million to date. And we have a projection of savings of $6.3 million over the entire term of those bond payments. So for the capital additions in the general fund, we have a decrease of $130,000 as compared to the 22-23 budget. And to the site, the notable capital improvement request that we have is $7.3 million in the state water for the state water project capital components, and 1.3 for the site's reservoir project, and $550,000 for Lake Paris seepage recovery project costs. Moving on to the reserves, for the 23-24 budget, it includes a proposed addition of $35 million to the general fund reserves. And this proposed addition to the reserves is to go into the reserve for additional state water project water, reserve for operations, and reserve for non-state water project water. The funds available to add to the reserves are attributed to the additional tax revenue that we received this last year that were in excess of what the projected amounts were. They are from investment revenue in excess of the actual expenses in 22-23, less the anticipated expenses mainly attributed to the variable state water project costs. The excess tax revenues have been included in forecasting the future tax revenue need in setting the tax rate and the proposal of that 8 cents per $100 in the upcoming fiscal year. So all of this has been taken into account in that long-term forecasting. Lastly, we move on to the wastewater fund. Operating revenues. Overall, we see an increase of approximately $60,000 or 4.7% as compared to 22-23. And this is primarily attributed to the increase in the Coachella Valley Water District's rate that is collected by the agency and then remitted back to CVWD as a pass-through charge. Moving to the expenses, we see an increase in the wastewater service expense for Coachella Valley Water District, estimated at the total amount at $890,000, which reflects a monthly service charge of $27.10 per EDU equivalent dwelling unit, which is an increase from $24.98 in 22-23. And this is that other half. So we bring in the revenue and then, but we send it right on out to CVWD, and we do not maintain any of that other than our component that is set by our rates for our charge. City of Palm Springs wastewater service, that line item is estimated $112,000, which reflects a monthly service charge of $20 per EDU and a fixture unit charged of $198. And again, these are pass-through charges collected by DWA, remitted to the City of Palm Springs, and there's no planned increase by the City of Palm Springs for 23-24. Overall, the operating expense in the wastewater fund is an increase of $90,000. And there are no planned wastewater capital projects for 23-24, and that concludes the highlights of the budget, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Director Gracia, additional questions?
On the, we're collecting for CVWD and they're collecting some accounts for us as well. Is that?
They do not collect any for us. It's just a one-way for the treatment of that effluent that we convey to them from the Cathedral City Code.
Oh,
area.
okay. I get it. Thank you.
Anything else?
No.
Okay, thank you. Director Bloomer?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna?
Well, excuse me. Well, I have a comment, and I think I was expecting applause. I'm very sorry. I was expecting applause when you said the tax rate was being reduced from 10 cents per 100 to 8. I think we should recognize that's an achievement. And I think looking ahead, it could go down even more in the future.
Yes, so we do have long-term plans, and so every year we take a look at that to see, because the goal is to, just charge what we need for long-term and to have a steady gradual decrease in the rate into where we can then, if needs be, just stabilize it. And the goal is just have a stable rate year over year. So we're looking at it on a long-term basis, and next year potentially decrease it again, but we're waiting for more information as well. Long-term projected costs, those things change every year. So the goal is to not increase it in the future, to have it spike up. We want to smooth the rate out, to not have to increase it. So we're planning in the future to make sure that nice, even steady flow, and not to have to increase it in the future.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, thank you very much. I would like to commend our finance director for her mastery of the data. And I thought that's what you were talking about when you were saying applaud, because the presentation that you did summarizing these things was outstanding, and it's not simple. I do have two questions. The unfunded accrued liability. Is there any way we can accelerate the catching up on that would save us any money?
So this is already our accelerated plan. So we put in kind of like a 10-year plan to bring that to zero, to realize about that $10 million in savings. And the goal was to not just drain all of the reserves, so we can, have more control over that. Because of course we could go and we could use our reserves and pay that down more, but then we lose the flexibility there, that if an emergency happened, how do we respond? We can't just go into CalPERS and say we want that money back.
Right.
So it was a nice steady approach to be able, a measured approach, I should say.
And then my second question's on the same vein, our bond service.
Mm-hmm.
Can it be accelerated, and does that make any sense? Or
at this point in time, we did do an evaluation of that and presented it to the finance committee. We are not eligible to do so yet. So we cannot, I hope I'm recalling the dates correctly, but we cannot pay off anything in advance of 2026. So we have a lockout where it's not possible for us to do so. And even with where rates are now, what we're receiving on those invested funds that we have potentially in our reserves, we would, over the term of would be eligible to advance refund, would only be a savings about $90,000 total. So, but what we plan to do is in the next couple of years, take another look at it, now see what are we getting on our invested funds versus what we could be saving. See, does it make sense to go through that exercise or not? And as we can see, we've already saved about $6 million on the advance refunding that we did prior. So, in comparison, then right now it doesn't make sense, but we'll continue to keep an eye on it to see at a time that it does make sense, we'll evaluate.
thank you.
All right, and I have no additional questions or comments. So I believe we can proceed to item 7B, discussion item, Board of Directors fee evaluation. Again, Finance Director signs.
Last one. Thank you, President Ortega. So you have before you an evaluation that we prepare every year for the Finance Committee. And it has been recommended by the Finance Committee to bring it to the full board for discussion. So a little bit of background. On July 7, 2015, the board adopted Ordinance 64, which amended Section 1 of Ordinance 62, which establishes the compensation for each day of service by the Board of Directors. This amendment, it fixed the compensation to $389.75 for each day of service until subsequently revised by the board. Beginning in May 2020, as indicated, and each year after that, staff has performed a survey of the board compensation and benefits that they receive as compared to other water entities within Southern California, and has presented to the Finance Committee in conjunction with the preparation of the annual budget. Each year, the Finance Committee has made a recommendation as to whether the item should be brought to the full board for discussion or and consideration of any increase. And thus far, there has been no recommendation to bring to the full board until this year. At its May 25th meeting, the Finance Committee reviewed the compensation and benefits survey and decided they did not make a recommendation whether they'd like to propose an increase in the fee received for each day of service. However, they did want it presented to the full board for discussion. So to get into the survey results, according to the survey, the agency's benefits, other benefits other than the compensation for the day of service matches the other entities where that information was available, where the board of directors are provided the same benefits as employees were eligible. The agency's fee as compared to other water entities ranges from 56% to 290% more per day of service. And in dollar figures, that's $139.75 more to $289.75 more per day of service. According to California Water Code, the increase may not exceed an amount equal to 5% for each calendar year following the operative date of the last adjustment. Now, that's just informational and something that our legal counsel had highlighted for us at the last meeting that this was discussed. And while the Finance Committee did not make a recommendation to increase the rate of pay received by the board directors for each day of service, they did indicate they would not support an increase in excess of the most recent consumer price index amount of 4.2% that is used for the cost of living adjustments for the agency's employees in 23-24 fiscal year, even though the government code would allow for a 5% increase. So I provided for you what a 4.2% increase would mean according to a day of service, increasing it to $406.12 from the $389.75 that is currently. Overall, the fiscal impact, if something like this would be considered, would be approximately $9,000 agency-wide. So we do split between the different funds where we charge your compensation, but this is just looking at as agency as a whole, would be an increase of $9,000 approximately. And increasing the total expense from $212,000 to $221,000 for the fiscal year. If the board of directors pursued a rate increase, it must be revised by ordinance and adopted in accordance with Water Code sections 20200 through 20207, which includes a public hearing prior to the adoption of that ordinance. And you've been provided with the results and ordinance number 64 and historical board of directors fees for your reference and to aid in the discussion. And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have and leave it for board's discussion.
Thank you. Director Grasha, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions or comments. I look forward to hearing the public's input on this, so I would support that. Going to public hearing, I guess.
Director Bloomer.
I don't have any questions, just a comment that I had also explained during the Finance Committee that I would be in favor of a revised ordinance to be able to look at it on a yearly basis and have the ability to increase it and have it voted on by the board, which we would have to do anyways, right? We would, if for the increase, would have to be a board action each year.
Yeah, according to the code, each year it would require the adoption of a new ordinance, and with each increase, another public hearing.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd be in favor of a new ordinance, but I also said that I wouldn't vote for an increase for this year. So just those are my comments that I made in the Finance Committee meeting.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I looked up the inflation rate since these increases went through. The Federal Reserve has a nice tool on their website for that. So the 1974 rate of $50 would be 308 today. this ordinance 64, 2015 rate that we currently have, there's been a 28% increase in retail prices since then. So that's $497 in today's money to just correct for inflation. I think the rate is relatively generous compared to other agencies, but I think we should probably adopt the same increase as we give the other employees, which is 4.2% this year. So I'd be in favor of that. But I'm on the fence, to be quite honest. It seems decent as it is. So.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Thank you very much. I think last board meeting, I was the one that brought it up and didn't know it was going to be coming up anyway. Having been on a board for 9 years prior to this board, I've heard a lot about different levels of remuneration for day of service. And I guess it depends on agencies and how much activity the board gets. Our current board that I'm sitting on now, we seem to have a lot on our plate. I looked at my past month worth of meetings and averaged out, and I'm not talking about when we went away to Aqua or sites, but just our general meetings, anywhere from 3 to 4 hours involving the meetings, studying before the meeting, after the meeting, and things of that sort. And I say that because our time is valuable as elected officials, and also our abilities as elected officials are valuable. I believe the other districts that are compared are behind. I think that we're on target right now. But I think the other districts are really far behind. It's not a popular thing for a board to raise or give themselves a raise. And I don't even like that term, a raise. But it's a true thing. Some boards do not do that because they don't want the public backlash, or in other words, they want to be reelected. And I think sometimes as board members, we have to look at the hard picture when it comes to our finances as a board or as a district, and then as regards our personal or remuneration for day of service. I like to view boards as professionals that are elected by the public. And you only get the professionals that put their name out there and want to be elected if it makes sense for them to do it. Two of our current board members, well, I'll just speak for myself. I'm retired. And from the two of you guys, I'm thinking of Director Bloomer and Ortega. You guys are working full time. And I don't know how you do it, honestly. I know how much, no sleep, right? So I'm saying all these things often, mostly for the general public to hear as well. As you consider who you vote for, consider their background, their professionalism, and the time they spend as a director. And then, are we valuing our time adequately as a board? I guess that really is what it comes down to. And I think that we are. And I appreciate what Director Bloomer said, that we should put together an ordinance that next year we review this, because we don't want to fall behind. There are districts that are so far behind now in the day of service for their directors that for them to jump, there could be people in the public that'll freak out. And it's no different than raising rates. There have been boards that have refused to raise rates on anything, especially the water world that I've been involved in, only to have it backlash when they finally have to, but if they don't, they go insolvent. Anyway, I'm going to get off my TED talk here and just say I appreciate what Director Bloomer was suggesting, and I would certainly go for something like that as well.
Thank you. So I feel like we have a couple of ways, or seems like we have a couple of different ways to approach this. And I'm looking at Director Sines and also our legal counsel. I've heard one option would be to propose an ordinance that would ask us to address this on an annual basis starting next year. I also am hearing an opportunity for a public hearing, which seems more immediate. Is there something else I might have missed in this conversation so far?
Well, this is the public.
The ordinance is reviewed
we-
at a public hearing.
Right.
It's all one and the same.
Okay, so it would be, well, it could be a public hearing to actually take action this year, could it not?
No, we have to pass an ordinance and be able to, a new ordinance and to be able to increase.
To increase it requires a new ordinance.
'Cause
And
this-
Before you could adopt the ordinance, that would require a public hearing.
Right, but the public hearing could be for an ordinance to accept the rate increase now as opposed to talking about it sometime in the future. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah,
Yeah.
you could, I mean, right now you could adopt an ordinance to increase the rate to whatever you determine it to be. It can't exceed 5%
Sure.
per year since the last increase.
So again, I'm kind of hearing two different things. I'm hearing have a public hearing for accepting an increase effective, essentially, I guess, in July, or an ordinance that we would take us down a path of every year having a review.
You
When you
could-
say public hearing, are we talking about a separate meeting from the board meeting or?
No, it could be a public hearing
It's
conducted at
just
the
an
board
agenda
meeting.
item.
We have to pass the new ordinance first because the current ordinance says it's a flat fee with no increase. So in able to increase, we need a new ordinance, correct?
Yeah, but for each increase, you'd have to have a new ordinance for each increase.
Right.
And so, and every time you would adopt an ordinance, you'd have to have a public hearing. So, you don't need an ordinance right now to give you the opportunity to review it again next year and each year thereafter. You can do it just 1 year at a time without an ordinance that allows you to do that because the statute says you could do that.
Okay.
So, and at any time, I suppose you could conduct a public hearing and just see what kind of input you get from folks, but they won't know what they're reacting to unless you tell them what the proposed increase
Right.
is.
Mhm.
You know, if it's 50 cents, no one will pay any attention. If it's $10.50, they might. I don't know.
Sure.
Could the new ordinance have the language in there that the board can evaluate on a yearly basis to increase the same rate as the employees, not to exceed 5%? Because isn't that what it was in the previous ordinance?
The previous ordinance provided for an automatic increase without a public hearing each time.
Hmm.
And that was an ordinance that was adopted way back in the 80s.
Right.
And after that ordinance was adopted, upon more careful review of the statute, there was a concern expressed, and I think it was valid, that if you're going to, that each time you're going to have another increase, you need to have another public hearing. So it can't just be automatic increases with only one every year with only one public hearing. And I've thought about it a lot and examined the language. The language is a little bit fuzzy. I understand why it was done the first time with automatic increases without another public hearing. But you know, frankly, it was brought to my attention that the language probably is correctly interpreted to mean that you can't have another increase without having another public hearing.
So even if we had an ordinance, which I think the direction that Director Bloomer is going, that ordinance would still potentially have language in it that said every year we have this consideration and that would be part of a public hearing.
Yeah, you'd have to have a new
Mhm.
public hearing for each increase. That's my opinion now.
Mhm. Okay. All right.
Are we making a motion to adopt a
This is a discussion
For-
item.
oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to kind of get us there to
All
where
right.
we might be making a motion to do so.
Well, I wanted to reserve my comment. I share
Okay, go
the
ahead.
same thoughts as Director Bauman, and I thought I was going to save those for at the conclusion of the public hearing, but we're not. I misread that. So yeah, if we can get a public hearing date established, that'd be great.
What do you feel about it?
Oh, I think that you hit it just about right on the amount. Was it $16.50? Is that right? I didn't want to have to.
$16.37 would be a 4.2% increase, which would match what the agency employees will be receiving effective January 1st, 2023, according to COLA. Yeah, July 1.
Director Bloomer, did you sound like you had another thought?
But as of, we'd have to have a new ordinance. Right? Because we can't even adopt an increase with a public hearing, according to the,
Not without a new ordinance. Yeah.
Right.
You'd have to, the action you would take would have to be another ordinance.
So
so the next step would be to look at a draft new ordinance. If the finance committee wants to look at it and then the board can look at it,
That's
that's the next.
That's the process that I have in mind that makes the most sense.
Right.
What the statute says is the notice of the public hearing needs to be published in the newspaper. And the ordinance is adopted, and then the statute says the ordinance can't become effective until 60 days after it's adopted. And frankly, that's to provide a period for a referendum if someone wanted to challenge the ordinance. So it's an ordinance that would be adopted that would become effective 60 days after the date of adoption.
Right. So the conversation today is really, are we going to be directing staff to prepare an ordinance? There's no motion required to do that. Okay.
Director Bloomer, was it your intent to wait a year to do this?
No, I said, look at the draft ordinance. I mean, as soon as possible.
Okay. How does everybody else feel about that?
I think we should schedule a public hearing and put the increase in that you had recommended and that.
We
put it-
can't increase it without a new ordinance.
Right, and that's gonna all
But
be.
that'll be part of the
written in one
public hearing.
ordinance. That's, we're gonna pass
Right.
an ordinance, so those two
Right.
things included.
Yeah.
At the next meeting. And then I get to tell all the reasons why I think it's important that we do this. And I don't want to do that now because I don't want to set fire to other directors on other boards. But I'm
Yeah.
convinced that it's a
You
thing to do.
the doing it at the next meeting might be a little bit tight because of, you have to have publish notice of a public hearing. You have to have the.
I was
public
trying to
hearing.
be dramatic.
Oh, sorry.
How about the first available meeting where that opportunity to publish has happened?
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay, great.
I would like one further clarification on direction. So yes, we'll be proceeding with preparing an ordinance to present and publish with the 4.2% to match agency's COLA increase, employee COLA increase. Would this, I heard one time it seemed saying to be presented to the finance committee. Would you like it presented to the finance committee? Because this has already gone to the finance committee with these rates and they said they would support a 4.2%. No, nothing
Yeah,
in
I think we're
excess
done.
of.
Yeah, we can. be done.
Okay. So we will proceed with preparing ordinance and going through the proper steps to do so, to bring it back at a time sufficient enough for us to be able to do those administrative procedures.
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
And
Thank
if
you.
I could add on to that, so
Yes.
we'll prepare draft ordinance, publish notice of a public hearing on it. And then when you review the ordinance, there will also be a public hearing conducted on the ordinance. Is that what you want?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you. So discussion 7C, which is 2021-2022 Sigma Annual Report. I guess we have a PowerPoint coming up and Ms. Rapola, could you come to the podium, please?
No, you help me. I'm just gonna bring up the staff. Right now.
Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I appreciate the opportunity to present an overview of the water year 2021, 2022 Sigma annual reports for the Indio, Mission Creek, and San Gorgonio Pass subbasins. The Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA, requires that groundwater sustainability agencies, or GSAs, in high and medium priority basins develop and implement a groundwater sustainability plan. Alternatively, if there is an existing plan in place which meets the requirements of SGMA, you can submit that plan. It would be considered an alternative plan. These GSPs or alternative plans provide a guidance on how each groundwater basin will achieve long-term sustainability. And following adoption of a GSP or alternative plan, Sigma requires that GSAs submit annual reports to the Department of Water Resources by April 1st of each year. These annual reports provide groundwater information and progress made toward implementing the GSP during the prior water year. The Desert Water Agency is a GSA in the Indio, Mission Creek, and San Gorgonio Pass subbasins. Excuse me. And in order to meet the requirements as outlined by Sigma, the Desert Water Agency, along with other GSAs in each subbasin, prepared and submitted Sigma annual reports for water year 2021, 2022 to DWR by the April 1st deadline. Let me grab my clicker. Perfect. Okay. Okay, so just a broad overview of what this presentation contains. Again, I'll go over a quick summary of Sigma, which we pretty much already did. And then the annual reporting requirements as required by Sigma, followed by a broad overview of the water year 21-22 annual reports for Indio Subbasin, Mission Creek Subbasin, and finally San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin. As I previously stated, Sigma requires that high and medium priority basin GSAs implement either a groundwater sustainability plan or submit an alternative plan that meets the requirements of Sigma. And once that plan is submitted, GSAs are required to submit those annual reports to the Department of Water Resources, along with an alternative plan or GSP update every 5 years. So that is actually a more in-depth review of your plan. The annual reports are more of a year-end review or a snapshot of the groundwater conditions over the previous water year. And again, Desert Water Agency is a GSA for Indio, Mission Creek, and San Gorgonio Pass subbasins. In terms of annual reporting requirements, we have to submit those annual reports by April 1st of each year. For the reports that we just submitted, we're looking at water year 21-22, which began October 1st, 2021, and concluded September 30th of 2022. These annual reports provide a detailed description and graphical representation of the conditions of the subbasin, including general information about the subbasin, subbasin conditions and water balance information, and implementation progress of projects and management actions. We call these PMAs that have been identified in the groundwater sustainability plan or alternative plan. So we'll begin with a broad overview of the water year 21-22 annual report for the Indio subbasin. Our Indio subbasin team consists of project consultants Todd Groundwater and the Indio subbasin GSAs, Coachella Valley Water District. You can see their boundary in yellow at the map to right. Coachella Water Authority, their area is that little green right in the middle. Desert Water Agency's boundary is the blue, upper right, or upper left, I'm sorry. And then Indio Water Authority is the small pink area in the middle of the map. So these are the GSAs that are coordinating with the Indio subbasin. In terms of groundwater elevation data was gathered from a total of 374 wells throughout the Indio subbasin, and that data was used to create contour maps as well as change in storage maps. So on the map to the right, you can see all of the little dots spread out throughout the basin. Those are the wells that we use to collect data. Of those 374 wells, the 2022 alternative plan update identified 57 key wells, which would be used to track groundwater sustainability. For each of these 57 wells, those are those little green dots that you see, a minimum threshold was established. And what this is it's a qualitative measurement of groundwater sustainability. It represents the lowest observed groundwater level, which occurred around the year 2009. And these minimum thresholds represent
undesirable results that may occur due to consistent groundwater lowering, a decrease in groundwater storage, decreased water quality and that sort of thing. So these are the numbers that we don't want to get to. We want to make sure that we're maintaining our groundwater levels above these minimum thresholds. For water year 21-22, the current groundwater elevations for each key well was compared against these minimum thresholds. And in all cases, key well levels were above the minimum threshold. So this is a good thing. For groundwater production, the majority of our wells are metered. The exception would be minimal pumpers and tribal trust lands. So these are private wells that pump less than that minimum threshold amount of either 10 or 25, depending on whether it's DWA, CVWD. So we don't meter those. We estimate their usage. In total, 282,079 acre feet of groundwater was produced in the Indio subbasin, with 82.5% going to urban use, 16.5% to agricultural use, and the remaining 1% being split between industrial use and undetermined use. So that undetermined would be those minimal pumpers or tribal trust lands. And this total represents a decrease of 2% in groundwater pumping from the prior water year. This is not a surprise. Keep in mind that during water year 21-22, we were in drought conditions. We had water shortage contingency plans in place, so it's not surprising that we are pumping less water. Surface water diversion for direct use. The Desert Water Agency is the only agency in the Indio subbasin that diverts surface water for direct use. And in water year 21-22, we diverted water from our Snow Creek intakes as well as our Chino intakes. Falls Creek was not in operation during water year 21-22 due to storm damage sustained during that 2019 storm. 100% of our sources are metered. And in total, we diverted 611 acre feet of surface water for direct use within our service area. The source of imported water can be used in one of two ways. It can either be delivered for direct use via the Coachella Canal. This takes place within CVWD's plan area. In total, 271,485 acre feet of imported water was delivered for direct use via the Coachella Canal, with 85% of that going to agricultural use and the remaining 15% going to urban use. The other way that we use imported water is for groundwater replenishment or artificial recharge. So this is where we take that Colorado River water and we deliver it to one of our 3 groundwater recharge facilities in the Indio subbasin. In 2021-22, excuse me, the total amount of groundwater replenishment that took place was 67,438 acre feet spread across those 3 GRFs that you see below. So Palm Desert and Thomas E. Levy are located within CVWD's area. Whitewater River GRF is located just up from Palm Springs, sandwiched between the I-10 freeway and Highway 111. In terms of recycled water production, we have 3 water reclamation plants, which provide recycled water to our customers. Desert Water Agency has a recycled water facility out back, which receives treated wastewater from the Palm Springs wastewater treatment plant. And CVWD has 2 water reclamation facilities, Warp 7 and Warp 10. In total, 13,875 acre feet of recycled water were produced for use by customers in the Indio subbasin, with 100% of that going to urban usage. In terms of total water use for water year 2021-22, we're looking at water demand or who's using that water versus water supply or where we're getting it from. The majority of water demand in 21-22 came from a combination of agricultural use and urban use, with small demand coming from industrial use and those undetermined private pumpers. Our water supply came from a majority of direct use via the Coachella Canal, as well as groundwater pumping, with small supply amounts coming via recycled water production and surface water diversion for direct use. And in terms of our overall change in storage, this is where we're looking at what's coming into the subbasin versus what's leaving the subbasin. So when we're talking about inflows, we could be talking about natural mountain front runoff or precipitation, artificial replenishment via those imported water deliveries,
We could be talking about subsurface inflow, which is water that's flowing via the aquifer from an adjacent subbasin into the Indio subbasin, or wastewater percolation from treated wastewater plants. In terms of outflow, we're looking at groundwater pumping, drains on the eastern end of the valley near the agricultural areas, natural processes such as evaporative loss and evapotranspiration, and subsurface outflow where water is leaving via the aquifer from the Indio subbasin and flowing into the Salton Sea. Our overall change in groundwater storage for the Indio subbasin was a negative 76,786 acre feet. Again, keep in mind, this was drought conditions during this water year, so it's not a surprise that this is an overall negative number. When we're talking about groundwater sustainability within a subbasin, it's important not to focus just on the year-to-year change, but rather look at the long-term change in storage. Since 2009, the 10-year average change in storage within the Indio subbasin has been positive, and the 20-year average has been near balance, which means that we're maintaining our levels. Over the long-term, levels throughout the basin have either increased or stabilized with very few localized declines. So if you look at the map to the right, those cooler colors of the blues and the greens represent areas where we're seeing an overall increase in groundwater storage. Those very small orange to red dots are those very few localized decline areas that we're seeing. And those overall increases in storage are a good indicator that the Indio subbasin is being sustainably managed. We always take a look at progress made on our projects and management actions. Again, we call these PMAs. So for water year 2021-22, in the area of water conservation, there was continued education and outreach by way of our regional CV Water Counts program. This is very popular with our customers. And through this program, we offer several indoor and outdoor incentive programs. I know Esther talked about our turf buyback program, so that's a big one for us. We continue that every year through our own funding as well as grants that we receive, which we were very fortunate to receive several grants this year. So that will help that program move forward. In the area of water supply development, again, as Esther alluded to, we continue to contribute funds and participate in those long-term storage and delivery projects, such as the Lake Paris Seepage, Sites Reservoir, and the Delta Conveyance Project. In the area of source substitution and replenishment, there were several recycled water expansion projects that took place throughout the Indio subbasin, as well as finalizing our right-of-way grant for continued operation of the Whitewater River Groundwater Recharge Facility. And in the area of water quality protection, there's continued implementation of the Coachella Valley Salt and Nutrient Management Plan, Work Plan, or CVSNMP. This is a long-term project and the final plan is expected to be completed in calendar year 2027. So you're going to see this one reoccur on presentations over the next couple of years. If you would like more information on the Indio Subbasin Annual Report, you can visit the website at www.indiosubbasinsigma.org. Moving on to an overview of the water year 2021-22 annual report for the Mission Creek Subbasin. Our Mission Creek Subbasin team is composed of our project consultants, WSP, formerly Wood, our Mission Creek Subbasin GSAs, which is Coachella Valley Water District. Their area is in blue on the map. Desert Water Agency, it's that salmon colored area. And then the management committee, which includes CVWD, DWA, and Mission Springs Water District. In terms of groundwater elevation, the 2022 alternative plan update for the Mission Creek Subbasin identified 9 key wells, which would be used to track groundwater sustainability within the subbasin. Similarly to Indio Subbasin, these wells were assigned minimum thresholds. And current groundwater elevations for water year 21-22 were compared against those thresholds. In all cases, levels for these key wells were above minimum thresholds for water year 21-22. Additional data was taken from 9 wells within the subbasin and used to create contour maps and change in storage maps for the annual report. So if you look at the map to the right, there's some tiny little black dots. Hopefully you can see them on your screens. Those are the additional wells. And the color-coded locations that you see, those are the key wells. For groundwater production, we saw a total of 14,234 acre feet extracted from a total of 24 wells and minimal pumpers throughout the Mission Creek subbasin. 90% of that went to urban use, with the remaining 10% being split between agricultural, industrial, and undetermined use. One thing to note with the Mission Creek subbasin is that you did have water being both imported into as well as being exported out of the subbasin in order to meet groundwater needs in adjacent subbasins. 6,277 acre feet of water was exported out of the Mission Creek subbasin and into the adjacent Desert Hot Springs subbasin by CVWD and Mission Springs in order to meet demands.
I have a question on that.
Yes, sir.
As I understand, the Desert Hot Springs subbasin is the hot water.
That's right. Which is
How-
part of why they do this. That's right.
Can you give me more data on this? How is it exported?
So what they do is they extract the water in the Mission Creek subbasin through their wells. And then they transport it via transmission lines from Mission Springs into Desert Hot Springs.
If I could interject, I think that Mission Springs Water District has a system that delivers, that includes customers that are actually located in the Desert Hot Springs area. And so the production wells are in the Mission Springs subbasin, but their delivery system extends into the Desert Hot Springs.
Okay,
That's
that's
correct.
what that means. Yeah,
Yeah,
because
exactly.
I live in the Desert Hot Springs aquifer
Okay.
area, but of course I get Mission Springs water. Okay,
Which is,
I understand now. Yes, it does. Yeah,
That's
it's same with the, yeah. All right, thank you.
Welcome. And when you're talking about water flow underground, it does flow in between subbasins. So you may have some water that starts further north and flows to the south. Because of the way the subbasin is set up in Desert Hot Springs, they don't have the wells to pull up the water. So they take it out of Mission Springs and they deliver it to those
You're not
customers.
going to take water out of the Desert Hot Springs.
No, that's
Subbasin.
my point. Yes,
Right.
that's correct. So they're utilizing the water that's available in Mission Creek and they're delivering it to Desert Hot
Got it.
Springs. Additionally, you have 225 acre feet of groundwater, which was extracted from the adjacent Garnet Hill sub area. That's technically part of the Indio subbasin and imported into Mission Creek to meet demand. So again, you've got some water coming in, you've got some water leaving. Additional water sources within the Mission Creek subbasin, they really have limited sources of supply. So they do not utilize surface water for direct use. We do have, as you can see on the photo to the right, a groundwater recharge facility. However, for water year 2021-22, there were no imported water deliveries to this facility.
But it's colored in.
I know, I wish that was indicative of this year, but it was not. But that's in the better year. So hopefully this water year, because we've seen so much water, exactly, that's what we would expect to see. Currently, there is no recycled water use. However, the good news on this is that they are in the process of constructing a recycled water facility out there in Mission Springs. So in the future, you will have a source of supply via recycled water production. So the only other source of water that you had for water year 21-22 in the subbasin was via wastewater percolation. A total of 2,306 acre feet of wastewater was treated and disposed of by way of percolation or evaporation. Overall change in groundwater storage. Again, we're talking about what's coming into the subbasin versus what's leaving. Our total inflows were 11,590 acre feet. Our total outflows were 17,603 feet. So your overall change in storage within the Mission Creek subbasin was a negative 6,013 feet. Again, when we're looking at groundwater sustainability, it's important to look at that long-term change in storage rather than the year-to-year. And since water year 2008, 2009, the long-term average change in storage in the Mission Creek subbasin has been positive. Overall, water levels throughout the subbasin have either increased or stabilized. We have seen very localized declines directly adjacent to the Mission Creek groundwater facility. The reason why you have that is during years of high water deliveries, you get what's called water mounding. So those groundwater elevations increase very quickly. And then in years with lower amounts or no water deliveries, that water is going to go down quickly as it dissipates throughout your subbasin. So you're going to see a lot more fluctuations directly adjacent to that facility than you will throughout the rest of the subbasin. Again, on the map to the right, those blues and those greens represent overall increases in groundwater storage or water levels. And overall, we have an indicator here via this map and those overall increases that the Mission Creek subbasin is being sustainably managed. In terms of progress made on projects and management actions within the Mission Creek subbasin, in the area of water conservation, we do have that continued outreach and education from the same CV Water Counts program. This is a regional program that everybody's participating in. In the area of water supply, as I mentioned earlier, we are in the process of constructing that recycled water facility within Mission Creek's area. So in the future, we will have additional source via recycled water. And we saw continued participation in those long-term storage and delivery projects such as Lake Paris Seepage and Sites Reservoir. In the area of water quality protection, there were several septic to sewer conversion projects taking place within Mission Springs service area, as well as continued work on the implementation of the CV SNMP or Salt Nutrient Management Work Plan. In terms of well management, we have continued development of a regional well inventory system. So this will allow us to get a better handle on water usage throughout the subbasin. If you'd like more information on the SGMA annual report for the Mission Creek subbasin, you can visit the website at www.missioncreeksubbasinsigma.org. And finally, we will go through an overview of the water year 2021-22 SGMA annual report for the San Gorgonio Pass subbasin. Our San Gorgonio Pass team is composed of our project consultants, Provost and Pritchard, and the San Gorgonio Pass subbasin GSAs, Desert Water Agency GSA. Our area is all the way to the east end of the subbasin on the map at right. San Gorgonio Pass GSA, and the Verbinia GSA. In terms of groundwater elevation data, water levels were collected from 9 representative monitoring wells throughout the subbasin for water year 2021-22. This data was used again to create contour maps as well as change in storage maps for the annual plan, as well as being used to determine groundwater sustainability within the region. So minimum thresholds were also established for each of these wells. And in all cases, the groundwater levels for water year 21-22 in all 9 wells were above those minimum threshold levels. In terms of groundwater production, we saw a total of 7,596 acre feet of groundwater extracted during water year 2021-22. The subbasin is separated into what they call storage units. So the Banning Canyon storage unit is that area in blue. Other canyons are Millard and Potrero Canyon. So those are those areas in green. That is an estimated number. That's usage by the Morongo Band of Mission Indians. The Banning subunit is the area in pink on the lower left, and the Cabazon storage unit is the larger green area. In terms of Desert Water Agency's GSA area within this subbasin, we saw a total of 59 acre feet of groundwater extracted during 21-22. For total water use, again, we had that 7,596 acre feet of groundwater production. Of that total, 82% went to urban and domestic use, with 18% going to industrial use. And there were no other water sources or use types indicated for the annual report. In terms of long-term change in storage within San Gorgonio Pass subbasin, recent records do show a continued decrease in cumulative change in storage. However, the groundwater models that have been created have a longer base period than what you're seeing here. So those do show increases in cumulative storage during wet periods. And over time, we would expect that trends will show both increases and decreases in cumulative change in storage, depending on the type of water year that we have. If you look at the graph to the right, you can see a small example of that because water year 2019 was what we would consider a wet year. And so there is a slight peak there. Over time, we would expect to see more peaks and valleys. In terms of progress made on projects and management actions for the San Gorgonio Pass subbasin,
There was limited progress made due to the fact that the groundwater sustainability plan itself was submitted for the first time during this water year. GSAs are, however, beginning to implement components of that groundwater sustainability plan, including monitoring of network wells, public outreach, and development of implementation plans for various projects as identified in the GSP. One item to note is that the San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin did apply for state funding in order to fill some of the data gaps that were identified in their GSP. And they have been recently recommended for funding to construct 4 monitoring wells in the subbasin. So this is great news for them because it's going to allow for more data collection and a better overall picture of the groundwater conditions within the subbasin. If you'd like more information on the San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin Annual Report, you can visit the website at www.sgpgsas.org. In summary, groundwater levels, groundwater storage, and other data included in the annual reports document that the Indio and Mission Creek subbasins are continuing to meet their respective sustainability goals and sustainability criteria. In the San Gorgonio Pass Subbasin, groundwater levels were above the specific minimum thresholds in all 9 of the representative monitoring wells, and the subbasin was recently recommended for funding to address data gaps by constructing 4 additional monitoring wells in the subbasin. And the water year 2021-22 Sigma annual reports for the Indio, Mission Creek, and San Gorgonio Pass subbasins demonstrate that projects and management actions, or PMAs, as identified in each respective subbasin's GSP or alternative plan update are being implemented. Are there any questions by the board?
Thank
No,
you.
that was a lot of information to take in, so I.
That was, but thank you very much. We'll start with Director Gracia.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Comment, I'm a little, I hadn't followed along much on the San Gorgonio Pass subbasin because it was kind of never really made it, but, to the forefront in my endeavors at Mission Springs and then here. It's the first time I've noticed that they're in such a deficit, and I'd like to know more about that. I guess I'll have to start attending their meetings as well. I guess the process that I would have to undertake personally, but it seems that it appears that there's an issue with recharge. Is that true, or are they not? I thought they had access to a turnout.
So they are participating in those programs, and that's something that is part of those PMAs that they have in their plan, is how do we get additional supplies and bring them into the area? For example, they used to have a turnout at the Whitewater River watershed, which provided surface water, but that was damaged during the Apple Fire, and it hasn't been usable since that time. So they do have options. Those options are included in that report that they'll be working to implement as we move forward.
Wow. All right. Thank you.
So maybe I can just comment, the recharge that the pass does is not for this area. It's for the Beaumont area.
Right.
So there's no, artificial recharge. Everything that recharges this basin is mountain front, basically. And the reason that you have a decline like that is it's solely dependent on that. And so much water leaves the basin and comes into the Indio subbasin that the actual pumping is a very small percentage of the outflow of that basin. So, turning the dial back on production there really wouldn't change things. They're just really dependent on natural recharge.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Director Bloomer.
I don't have any questions, but thank you very much for the report.
Yes, great.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I have a bunch, unfortunately. What is our responsibility on that San Gorgonio subbasin? I mean, it's the only one that seems to be in trouble, but what are we on the hook to do?
Let me answer that. Okay. So Mission Springs has 2 wells in our GSA area. And the recharge activity that goes on in the Whitewater recharge facility, believe it or not, has a tremendous impact on water levels in those wells. when we create a big water mound out there,
Okay.
it kind of pushes that water back. And so more water kind of goes into storage. And that is the reason why we assess replenishment charge on those wells. Even though they are not in the Indio subbasin, they are paying a recharge charge to us.
But here's a hypothetical. Suddenly there was a lot of water available in that San Gorgonio subbasin area, but it ultimately flow into the Indio subbasin.
Yes, it always does. I mean, if you look at, that basin is tilted
Mhm.
towards us. And then there's a Fingal Point, which is kind of just past where the 10 and the 111, a little bit west, not very far, like maybe a mile or half a mile. Past that convergence of those two freeways, there's a geological, I guess it would be a plate, that's pushed up. And so it just kind of spills over that. And as that basin fills up, more water comes this way. It's a function of how much water is in there, but the water is always flowing.
Oh, one of my
To
crazy
us.
ideas. There's a connection to State Water Project right there.
To recharge
Good on
it further up into another basin and have it flow through.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Interesting.
haven't really
Um,
thought about that.
The next one I have is we have advanced deliveries from the Met into the Indio subbasin, right? When you say it's sustainable, have you taken into account that they might take that back?
So sometimes they do, in the sense that they, let's say we have 20,000 acre feet of water being delivered, they may opt to count that against the advanced water delivery
Right.
instead of delivering physical water to the facility. So
So-
that is something that
When
we
we
consider.
measure the groundwater levels and you say they're going up, some of that is borrowed water, isn't it?
Advanced, not borrowed.
That's sorry.
But
Advanced delivery.
so in the analysis for Sigma in the 5-year plan,
Mhm.
they zeroed that out in
Okay.
2035. So
Gotcha.
just to see if we were sustainable. So to your point, we did look at that. And so theoretically, yes, we're in good shape.
That's good to hear. Good to hear. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
Yes, regarding the San Gorgonio area, what impact does the water bottling plant there, the Cabazon plant have on this area?
They get the water from the tribe, from the Morongo tribe.
I understand, but do we have any monitoring of that?
They report the extraction or not extraction, the diversion of the water every year to the state board. So we know what it is. In the grand scheme of things, it's not very big.
Really, because one would think that the amount of water they're pulling out of there would exceed the residents or other use of that water in that area.
It kind of, it's in the context of what I said before. There's so much water leaving that basin that the amount that it's actually being pumped or diverted is a very small percentage.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. And I don't have any additional comments or questions, but again, great presentation, very thorough and very informative, something that we obviously need to stay on top of. And these annual presentations to the board are very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So we can move on to item 8, which is Secretary Treasurer's report. Secretary Treasurer McKenna, thank you.
Financial highlights. We received 2.2 million in water sales revenue, $37,000 in recycled water sales revenue, and $1,500 in power sales revenue. We paid out 3 million in accounts payable. Year to date, water sales are 6% under budget, revenues are 6% under budget, and expenses are 8% under budget. Let's keep that up. There were 23,473 active users at the end of April, which is an increase of 5. We received 2.1 million in property taxes, $625,000 in replenishment assessments, which was split between operating fund, $614,000 came from operating fund and $10,000 from private pumpers. We received $315,000 in state water project refunds and paid $902,000 in state water project charges. In the wastewater fund, we received 76,000 and wastewater revenue receipts and paid out $71,000 in accounts payable. Extra digit there, I just ignored it.
Thank you. Item 9, General Manager's Report. Mr. Kraus, please.
Thank you again, Mr. President, members of the board. Desert Water Agency participated in an annual All Valley Chamber Mixer on May 17th, held at the Palm Springs Air Museum. DWA had a table with information about incentives. We provided infused water and handed out our copies of our lush and efficient books to attendees who are interested in following us on social media. The event is typically attended by around 600 people or more. Desert Water Agency will be closed on Monday, June 19th, in observation of Juneteenth. And in our system leak data report, we had 49 leaks, and that seems like a lot, but we had a long period of time between board meetings, so that's why that's higher. So, and if you look at the list, there's 4 or 5 that are on the replacement list. That is, and Luella Road being the one with 5 leaks on it is slated for 21-22 replacement, which is it behind us. So when is that going to get replaced?
Is that Caballeros number?
It's design.
Design. Okay.
Go ahead, Director Gracia.
I'm sorry. Is that Caballeros number 14 leaks? Is that for that small section or is that?
That's a 14-inch diameter.
Oh,
It's just
okay.
one leak. Usually it has more leaks though. So
Okay.
that's good. But we're replacing that.
We are.
In fact, Mike Riddell is reviewing the contract. You should just sign it. So. Okay, and that concludes my leak report. As far as meetings go, it's pretty eventful. We had a face-to-face meeting with some of the financing people for the Sites Reservoir. So they're getting ready to do that. And they're interviewing all the different participants. Had a meeting with Francis Barraza, Chief of Staff, Assembly Wallace's office. I went up to Sacramento and attended the state water contractor meetings. So we had DCP meetings and monthly state water contractor meetings. I participated in the Delta Conveyance Finance Authority board meeting, which I'm a director on that board. And Sites Reservoir Committee meeting, I also attended that monthly meeting at Maxwell. Another meeting with Senator Ciarto's office. Had a DCP discussion with Brad Coffey. He's MWD representative in Sacramento for the state water contractors, just trying to kind of feel out where Metropolitan is on the conveyance facility. Had a DWA Finance Committee meeting, tribal mediation meeting, the small technical committee. Attended our Prop 218 workshop. We had a face-to-face meeting with Mission Springs Water District on our rack rate increase. We had a DWA Executive Committee meeting. Attended a tour of the Sites Reservoir up in Maxwell with 4 of our directors. I had a CVWD tribal mediation. So that was a meeting that I had with CVWD to prepare for our technical committee meeting with the tribe. Then yesterday we had an all-day meeting, or it didn't last all day, but it was 3/4 of the day tribal mediation, small group meeting. And then I will have a meeting with Ashley Metzger on her work this month, a recap of that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. And Director Gracia, do you have any questions for Mr. Kraus?
Just to compliment you on all the work that you do. I don't know how you do it. I don't know how we're going to fill in when you're not doing it anymore. I know that there's a lot of movement, coming this agency's way on that regard. And it'll be interesting to see how those assignments, if you will, become filled, I guess.
Thank you. Director Bloomer,
No comments. Thank you.
Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
No comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And Vice President Bowman.
None, thank you.
Okay, and I have nothing else to add. So with that, we can move to item number 10, which is director's reports on meetings and events attended on behalf of the agency. And I'll just remind our all the directors that we'd like you to first tell us the date and the meeting that you attended, and before you give your description for both record keeping and compliance. So we'll start with Director Gracia.
I had two note, one of which is not reimbursable, but I attended the Sites Joint Authority Board meeting on the 19th. And it was good to hear an explanation as to the question that I had raised during the previous sites meeting at Aqua from the chairman, and that was on the subject of water rights. He spent a little time on that. And then the CBWD meeting that I attended on the 23rd of May, which was just routine in nature and nothing of concern to report on. And that's it.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
I attended the All Valley Chamber Mixer on May 17th. I don't know if that's compensable or not, but I will say the infused water was very popular, and there was lots of activity around the Desert Water Agency table. So that was good to see. And then I went on the Aqua Region 2 event, May 31st and June 1st, a tour of the sites, reservoir site. It was very informational. It was very good to see what our money is going towards, and how excited everybody is about it. Everyone in the group or on the tour was definitely seemed to be in favor of the project and getting things moving forward. And it seems to be that they're on a good path, and with a end date in mind. And so we actually got taken out and we're standing kind of in the middle of the reservoir, and hopefully would have been under 250 to 300 feet of water. We didn't see any rattlesnakes, which was good. And yeah, it was a quick trip, but very educational and good to see. So that's it.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I also attended the Sites Reservoir tour on May 31st and June 1st. I thought it was really, really interesting. You don't take lightly the submerging of 13,000 acres of California underwater, but I couldn't see a better place to do it. You know, it's not particularly suitable for grazing or crops. It's I won't say bleak, but it's remote. And I think it will be a great project for the state. And we really need to update our infrastructure. I moved here in 1983. I think one reservoir has been built in the state since 1983. So I'm in favor of that project. I think we will be able to humanely relocate the rattlesnakes. So thanks.
Vice President Bowman.
Yes, I too attended the May 31st, June 1st sites tour. And I do agree with what my fellow directors have said thus far. The fact that it's a bowl, and everybody that is doing any kind of farming right now, livestock or plants, are doing it on the other side of the hill because they don't have the water there. And it's a unique environment. The sites project is called New Water, and I like that phrase because we don't have it, and it will be new. It will be siphoned off, put in that big bowl, and I like that phrase. But I did ask Mark, our general manager. I said, "How did this sites project come to be at DWA?" I said, "Who had the idea?" And he very sheepishly said, "It was me." So Mark, I want to thank you for the eyes, the 50,000-foot view ahead of what we need in California, what we need down here in the Coachella Valley. I want to thank you for thinking of this new water before it was even thought of by most people. So thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. So I attended 4 meetings on behalf of the water agency, 3 of which were not compensable. The first was the UCR School of Public Policy Southern California Water Affordability Summit, apparently number 2. So I missed number 1 last year. But I think it was Secretary Treasurer McKenna at our last meeting had brought up the subject of water affordability. And this happened to be right after that meeting. We had 3 keynote speakers. We had Doreen D'Amato from the State Water Resources Control Board, Adon Ortega from Metropolitan, and then we had State Assembly member Eloise Gomez Reyes were our keynote speakers. I would say the bottom line, the sort of overall message was there's not a lot we can do about water affordability because of our Prop 218 considerations, but there are some things that can be done on the margin. And one, we're increasing programs such as programs that this agency participates in through the United Way, where credits can be given to water users who are having trouble paying their bills, and also to provide more grants to water agencies that are serving underserved communities or are small agencies that might not have the funding to do some of the infrastructure projects that need to be done. But sort of good message, but maybe not the message that a lot of people that were hoping to have, but more realistic perhaps. The second was in conjunction with Director Bloomer, we did have a nice lunch with our friends at Water Strategies from Washington, D.C., our representatives, our lobbyist representatives in Washington, D.C., and that was on the 23rd of May. And then I attended on the 26th of May, this water agency's rate workshop, which I think Director Grasha made reference to as far as the presentation that was given by Ms. Metzger, Director Sines, and our Assistant General Manager Johnson. That presentation was videotaped or was taped, and is, I believe, available on our website for other folks to attend. We have 2 more meetings coming up. I think one is in another week or so, the end of next week, and that will be in Cathedral City on a Saturday, I believe. And then there will be another meeting at the Desert Hot Springs Public Library. And finally, as a follow-up to the Aqua Region 2 sites project presentation and visit, the thing that impressed me, other than what some of the other directors have already talked about, but the thing that impressed me the most was the amount of local participation. And what I mean by local participation is that this is a project that is not being run by the state. It's not being run by the federal government. It is being run by local water agencies. This is their project, and they have essentially brought other agencies in, including ours, to participate. But it's really a local project, and I think that they emphasize that over and over again. And the people, for the most part, who are involved in the planning and the selling, if you will, of this project to not even the local community, but the state as well, are local people. These are people that grew up in the town of Maxwell, that grew up nearby, that have had farms, have had family farms in this area for over 100 years. So I really liked that component about it. It felt like this isn't really a top-down thing. This is a bottom-up kind of project that happens, by the way, to benefit much of the state. So when a response that I had from one of my constituents after hearing about the visit was, "Oh, you're stealing Northern California water," and that, we've heard that story before. And what I said was, this is actually a local project, and they happen to be helping us, and we're helping them at the same time by helping them finance. And oh, by the way, water belongs to everybody in California. It doesn't just belong in one place. So with that, unless there's anything else, we can conclude this portion of the meeting and move on to item 11, which are director's comments and requests. I'll start with Director Grasha.
I have no comments and no requests. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Bloomer.
No comments or requests.
Thank you. Secretary Treasurer McKenna.
I just commented that I like the way the agency recognizes Juneteenth. Desert Hot Springs just added it to their calendar a week ago. So you're ahead of them. Appreciate that. Just Gay Pride Month. Appreciate them too. You know, whether they're constituents or customers or colleagues or, you know, I'm proud of them. Thanks.
Thank you. Vice President Bowman.
And thank you.
Thank you. And I have nothing else to add. So we can conclude this part of the general meeting and move into closed session. I have, let's see, 10:04. So if we could meet in closed session at 10:15, that would be great. Thank you so much. Welcome back. Item number 13, we reconvening from into open session from closed session. We have no reportable actions that were taken, so nothing to report. And with that, we will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much.